Today's episode is brought to you by Swish. Personalised videos. Give the Dons fan in your life the ultimate surprise, whether it be a birthday, another celebration, or maybe just a sledge for your mate. Get in the tailored video from your favourite Don star. Ryan, I know you've used Swish before. Can you tell me an anecdote about how it went?
Well, a mate of mine is Collingwood man, so I don't know why I know him.
Boo.
But let's leave that aside for now. But he had a kid a couple of years ago, and I thought, what a nice present I could get him. I could get him a nice, like a cameo-esque sort of appearance from Dane Swan, who was on there.
Boo.
And he did, look, he put together a really good piece. He said, congratulations on the baby. He also told my mate that his life was over. And he congratulated him on what would be the start of many kids. And he's now had 2, so he wasn't wrong there. But no, it was a really good experience, and Dane did the job. Thankfully, he did it for me this time rather than at Anzac Day.
Well, there's better people than Dane Swan on Swish right now, I'll tell you that much, because you can get Nate Caddy, Mert. You can get a tailored message for Nate Caddy. Is that something you'd like? I reckon you'd love that.
Wouldn't mind one from Old Horse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it'd be pretty good. And guess what? If you use the code TheSash, you get 10% off at your checkout. You can find the link in our show description, also on our social media, but use code TheSash for 10% off. Let's start the show.
This is the Sash, definitely not the official podcast of the Essendon Football Club. I'm your host, James, and welcome to our very first opposition preview show of 2025. Joining me this evening to discuss our round 1 opponent in Hawthorne is Brad from Hawks Insiders. Welcome, Brad.
Thank you, James. Thanks for having me on the Sash. Enemy lines, but tonight we're friends, or today we're friends, so let's get stuck into it. Looking forward to breaking down Essendon's first match of the season and Hawthorne's second. But Essendon-Hawthorne, there's always something a little extra there.
Absolutely, and we're still relatively friendly, being a Tuesday night as we record, but I'm sure as the days pass, getting towards Friday, that might change a little bit and that old rivalry will come to the surface. Before we get into it, Brad, keen for you to kind of share with our listeners a little bit more around Hawks Insiders.
Hawks Insiders, similar to what you guys probably have at the Sash. Myself and a few of my mates, mad Hawthorne fans, a few years ago, just thought it'd be a good idea to get together. We often see in the media, especially within clubs, they like to keep things in-house, toe the line sometimes. But we just thought it'd be a good idea to create a community of Hawthorne supporters, members, fans, not only here in Melbourne, but we've got subscribers overseas, interstate, all over the place. So we just thought it'd be a good idea, create, I guess, a safe space, we like to call it, for supporters and fans, and just a place where we can get together, chat about Hawthorne, good and bad. When we started it, it was after the era, where Hawks had their successful period. Hawthorne were on the bottom of the ladder. So, it's sort of been, we've built from the ground up. And to be honest, not in a million years did I think the Hawks would have had the year that they did last season. At the start of last year, when we had our Hawks Insiders launch, we did a live show at the Glenferrie Hotel and we all gave our predictions for the season. And like the majority of the footy world, I'm sure the Bombers supporters thought the same. But we all had Hawthorne a lock to finish in the bottom 4. I thought we'd only win 6 or 7 games last year. And where we finished the season last year is probably where I thought we'd be in 2025 or 2026. So, yeah, Hawks Insiders, great community. We've got probably over 4,500 subscribers, which is great. So for those Bombers fans that want to get a little bit of, I guess their rival news and, come on board, we'd love to have you guys at Hawks Insiders. And you can also subscribe on Substack. We're on Substack. We launch a lot of, great content every week, exclusive content. So we'd love to have the Bombers and the Sash subscribers on board.
Beautiful, Brad. You might have a few wandering over just to see what the thoughts are from across enemy lines leading up to the game this Friday. But I know a lot of our Sash community got plenty of family and friends who have probably ventured over to the Hawks side. So make sure you let them know about Brad and the Hawks Insiders. And I know you mentioned that Glenferrie Hotel was rocking for the season launch, and I think you mentioned you got a live show coming up tomorrow as well. So I'd encourage everyone, if you know a Hawks supporter, let them know and point them in Brad's direction. Something we usually ask our Essendon guests, Brad, but I'll extend it out to yourself as well in terms of why do you support the team you support, and that is, of course, Hawthorne. What led you towards the Hawks?
It's a good question, James. It's an interesting story. I was born in Johannesburg, South Africa, and I came to Australia when I was 4 years old in 1989. And the school that I went to, the principal of the school, Jenny Wright, hello Mrs. Wright, was a mad Hawthorne supporter. And she said to myself and a few of my friends who came at the same time, she said, don't bother coming to school unless you support Hawthorne. And I was very fortunate because, as we know, Hawthorne won the flag in 88. They went back-to-back in 89, and they won the flag in 91 when they beat West Coast at Waverley Park. So I was a young kid at that stage. I only just started getting into football. I remember watching the 91 grand final. So that's how I started going for Hawthorne. Unfortunately, after 91, there was a lot of lean years until the Hawks won their next flag in 2008 when they upset Geelong. So it was a journey, but obviously was very lucky that Hawthorne was the side that I was able to support. And I've been very fortunate, to attend 4 grand finals, be there for 4 of them. Obviously, saw the 5th one when I watched it in 91. I was only 7 years old then, but, that was my journey to becoming a Hawthorne supporter.
Beautiful, mate. I always find it funny how people have been led there. Usually, it's a parent that made the choice for them. It sounds like you got a little bit further than that, but Mrs. Wright certainly responsible for pointing you in that direction. And you've obviously seen some success in those years, so not the worst direction to be pointed in that regard. One more question, generally speaking, Brad, before we sort of dive in and chat a little bit more around the game that you guys have under your belt already, but every time I tune into a footy podcast, whether it's a footy show, whether it's the radio and there's a Hawks guest on, the flavour of the month in terms of the question they're asked is, what is Hawkball? And I've had a few different answers. I've seen a few different answers. What's your perception of Hawkball? What does that mean?
Who knows? But we'll try our hardest. I've heard the Hawthorn players ask that question and not even they know. To me, Hawkball is exciting, fast, I guess modern day footy. It's none of this chip around that we often see teams do. Game style that Hawthorn actually had at the end of Clarko's tenure at the club. Boring, slow. I think what Sam Mitchell's brought to the club, and Sam's a brilliant coach. I'm sure a lot of Essendon supporters out there despise Sam Mitchell after, I guess, his actions on field post the drug saga, which I understand. I'd probably feel the same way if I was an Essendon fan, but I know deep down they know that Sam Mitchell is a brilliant coach and they'd probably love to have him as their coach. Brad Scott's an excellent coach, but what Sam Mitchell's brought to Hawthorn in the last few years as becoming the senior coach, he is going to be one of, if not the best coaches in the AFL over the next decade. He's got a brilliant footy mind. And the best thing about Sam Mitchell is the way he embraces each individual player separately. So he understands the younger players. Hawthorn's a very young side. They're probably bottom 3 or 4 in terms of age demographics in the AFL. They're going to lose Jack Gunston and Luke Bruce at the end of this year. So next year, they're probably going to be a younger side. But Sam Mitchell is old school when he played. He lived and breathed football. And we saw he was a premiership captain in the early days, but he lost the captaincy because for whatever reason internally at the club, the players decided to go with Hodge over Sam. And when Sam first became the coach of Hawthorn, I thought he would struggle, especially with, I guess, the younger generation of players that Hawthorn have at the club. You look at, I guess they call them the mosquito fleet, similar to the Rat Pack at Collingwood back in the day, Watson, Ginnivan, Connor McDonald, those type of players. But he's embraced them. He's gone the other way. He actually rocked up to our season launch last Wednesday night at the Glenferrie. And this was a Wednesday night, 2 nights before their season opener, they played Sydney at the SCG. There wouldn't be another coach in the AFL who'd be as relaxed as Sam. And to show the type of person that Sam is, he came to that event because he subscribes to Hawks Insiders and he saw that the guests that we had on the panel were Campbell Brown, Jordan Lewis, and an old player who not some of your supporters might not remember, Coxie, Adrian Cox, who was a cult figure at Hawthorne. He only played around 50 games, but Sam played with him in the early 2000s. And what Sam's done at the club now is he is so strong and passionate about bringing ex-Hawthorne players that haven't been part of our club back into the club. And Hawthorne is known, I guess, as the family club. And unfortunately, what we've seen, I guess, with the racism saga, that affected the club over the last few years at the end of Clarko's tenure at the club. But Sam is doing everything he can to turn that culture around. And I believe Hockball comes from what Sam Mitchell's brought to the footy club. And he's just been absolutely brilliant. And it's only at the beginning. He's going to be, I believe, the Hawthorn coach for at least the next 10, to 12 seasons.
Yeah, certainly a positive rap for Mitchell, and that seems to be the sentiment across the footy world at the moment. The one kind of point that you made that's been most interesting for me on the outside looking in is the way that Mitchell has embraced those, larger-than-life personalities, your Ginnivans, your Watsons, your McDonalds, because certainly from my memory of when Sam Mitchell played his footy, he was sort of the polar opposite of that, got his hands dirty, nothing flashy, 30 possessions, most of them contested, and he'd let the others around him kind of do the flashy stuff. A team full of quick and silky left footers, he was kind of the in and under. So it's been an amazing, change from him in what I imagine was his kind of persona when he played to come and embrace these guys that maybe back in the day he would have given a clip around the ear to. So very very impressive from Mitchell, because I'm sure it didn't come naturally to him, but he certainly embraced those players. And it's a big part of the hot ball that we refer to. Jumping into the game that you guys have played, Brad, we had a bit of a false start thanks to Cyclone Alfred, but it was good to have footy back on Friday night nonetheless. And I thought it was a really good quality game for early on in the season. You were challenged through that third quarter after a hot start, but ended up winning relatively comfortably, although that's easy for me to say, maybe not so much for yourself if you were sitting on the couch watching the game. But I guess just to start off with your general thoughts on the game against Sydney.
Yeah, it was great to have our footy back. A challenging first up game. I actually spoke at our live show last week. I tipped Hawthorne by 4 goals. They ended up winning by 20 points. It probably could have been more. I'm normally on the pessimistic side of things. I predicted last year that Hawthorn were going to start the season 0-5, and I copped a lot of flack, and they started 0-5. They started exactly how I thought they would start last year. And to be honest, our first 6 rounds this year, there's not many clubs that have a tougher opening 6 opponents of the season. I think we play 5 of the top 6 teams from last year. And then we play the Bombers, which we'll touch on. And Essendon play their grand final against Hawthorn every year. Hawthorn haven't beaten Essendon since 2021. And for whatever reason, Essendon seem to always lift against Hawthorn. So I thought we'd win the game. I looked at Sydney's team on paper and we got them at a really good time. They were coming off their grand final loss, new coach at the helm, which normally takes a bit of time to get going. But they were without Goulden, who's one of their best 3 players, along with Heaney and Warner. Callum Mills, their captain, was obviously out. He's a loss. He's quite a flexible player. And then a few bit plays, Cunningham, McLean, Logan McDonald, who's not a star, but structure-wise, he's probably their number 1 forward. And with Logan McDonald not playing, it meant that Tommy McCartan, who's probably their best defender, had to play in the forward line. So on paper, I thought this was a great time to get Sydney. Playing at the SCG is usually quite, tough. But I thought Hawthorn would come out and, win, especially the disappointing end to last season. Did I think we'd win a final? Probably not. But in all honesty, I thought we should have beaten Port Adelaide. They had a few key players out. I didn't think Hawthorn played well at all, and they lost by less than a kick. James Sicily hits the post an inch the other way, and Hawthorn are playing in a prelim final. Would we have beaten Sydney the week after? Probably not. But I just thought it was a good time to get them. I thought to kick 14 goals, 12, to have 26 scoring shots when our forward line, in all honesty, was incredibly poor. The small forwards didn't perform. Marbio Chol on the stat sheet wouldn't look like he had a good game, but I thought he competed well all night. That's an issue that we'll touch on. That's the biggest issue with Hawthorne for the first, 10 to 12 rounds, with Kel Shadir and Mitchell Lewis out. So I thought the midfield dominated. I thought Lloyd Meek set the tone early. He dominated Grundy in the first half. Grundy, I thought, got the points just in the second half, but Lloyd Meek set the tone in the first half. Will Day kicked 3 goals in the first half. He got clamped down in the second half. But the good thing about Hawthorn's squad now is they've got so many flexible players. Blake Hardwick started forward. James Sicily started back. Sam Frost started as the sub. James Worpel, unfortunately, is out, who's going to be a big loss. That's a big plus for the Bombers because Worpel was, with Day, our best player in the first half. But he gets subbed. Sam Frost comes on, which allowed James Sicily to go forward and Blake Hardwick to go back. And Josh Battle's another one that can swing forward. Battle will stay back. Weddle's another one that can play a range of positions. And that's something that Sam Mitchell has spoken about. He said, you'll only play for Hawthorn and play consistently if you're able to play a range of positions at a high level. And you look at Hawthorn's squad and list now, and that's something I think the Bombers are going to try and, mirror with the Hawks. I've noticed Nick Martin in his first year was an absolute gun on a wing. And then last year, Brad Scott played him across half back. He had a really good season. I love him. I think he's an excellent player. Got a lot of, junk possessions. He's such a quality player. I've noticed this year in the preseason, Brad's played him across half forward. He's played him a bit on the wing. He's played him as a bit of a utility. And, he kicked a couple of goals in the practice game against Geelong. In my opinion, Merritt's your best player, but I think Nick Martin's probably your most flexible player and most skillful player. And that's what Brad Scott's got to try and do with your players. Harry Jones is another one, started his career as a forward, but last year, he played on a wing and I thought he was fantastic. So those are the type of things that Sam's brought to Hawthorn and worked really well last week. And it's going to be a nightmare for opposition coaches this season to plan to play Hawthorn because you don't know whether James Sicily is going to start centre-half forward or centre-half back. Is Blake Hardwick going to play as a forward pocket, a leading high half forward, or a lockdown defender? Weddle's another one that can play half back, wing, half forward, ruck. So that's what Mitchell's brought to the team. And last week we saw that perfectly where our forwards really struggled, but we still kicked 14 goals and dominated.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you touched on a few really important points there. I think if you had have said heading into that Sydney game that Hawthorn would kick 96 points and Ginnivan, Watson and Scholl would combine for 1 goal, I'd be wondering where those goals are coming from. But, again, talking about the variety and diversity of the list, I think there was a clear, implementation from Mitchell to have his midfielders resting forward as well. And that was obviously Will Day's, positive in the sense that he got on the end of 3, but next week it could be a Newcomb resting in the goal square and cashing in, or I was going to say Warple, but I understand he won't be there, but someone else will slot into that structure, maybe a McKenzie. So clearly a push from Mitchell to have some variety in that team. A couple of quick points before we move on to kind of speaking around the upcoming game. Brad, I was keen to get your thoughts on Sicily forward. Obviously, we've seen him as an All-Australian half-back, intercepting, running defender. Now, obviously, a clear want to push him forward with the introduction of Battle and Barras, shoring up the taller back line. What are your thoughts on Sicily playing majority forward this year?
Not for the whole year. It's a nightmare for Sam Mitchell because James Sicily with Will Day, Warple, as I mentioned before, but in the first half, Sicily was unbelievable as a defender. He was the best defender on the ground on Friday night. The issue Hawthorn has is James Sicily would be our best forward if he played as a forward, but he's still our best defender. His kicking is elite. Out of all the defenders in the AFL, I believe he's got the best disposal. He bites off a lot of hard kicks on 45-degree angles, but his kicking is unbelievable. There's no other player in the AFL that connects and hits the disposals that he can from the back half. So his kicking is so important down back, but defensively he's really, really strong. But then again, as I mentioned, Chol was one out as our key forward. On the SCG, you can get away with playing the one key forward. But the next 2 weeks, we play Essendon on the MCG and then Carlton on Thursday night footy. In my opinion, you need 2 key forwards. So Sam Frost was the sub last week, which I thought was an interesting selection. But then when you think about it, when he comes on, James then can go play forward. So in my opinion, this week on the MCG, unless Sam wants to bring in a Jack Gunston or a McCabe to make his debut as a father-son, his dad, Luke, played for Hawthorne. He's a defender that's been training as a forward. He'll play as a forward this year. I think Sicily has to start forward because I think Blake Hardwick, who played forward for 3/4 last week, is the matchup for Kako this week. Kako, even though he hasn't played a game, is going to be Essendon's best small forward this year. I think Gresham will probably be the sub, is a chance to be the sub, or he might start, but Kako is Essendon's already their best small forward. That's one area Essendon really need to improve. The days of the big, bulky key forwards, Caddy is going to be an absolute star. I love Caddy. I think he can lead your forward line for a long period of time, but you need 2 or 3 quality small forwards, like we saw with Brisbane, but like Hawthorne have, with Moore, McDonald, Ginnivan and Watson. So for me, I think Sicily needs to start forward this week if we don't bring in a Gunston or a McCabe. If we bring in a Gunston or a McCabe, then Frost will go out, Sicily will start back again. But then they've got that flexibility to move Sicily forward if the forward line's struggling.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, speaking about that variety, and it's all about options, and the season is longer than ever, and injuries do occur. We've obviously just talked about Warple there as well. So having those options, having the ability to move the magnets around is obviously a massive positive and really needed to see success now in the AFL. The other, I guess, point there as well that we probably haven't mentioned yet, and I heard him on the radio the other morning, is Mitch Lewis targeting sort of a mid-year return, it sounds like. I'm not sure how ambitious that, I guess, estimation was. I think I heard around 15 or something along those lines. Perhaps there's a buy in there somewhere. I think he said he was pushing for before the buy. Maybe the medical team was saying afterwards, and maybe they'll meet somewhere in the middle there. But, yeah, obviously another piece of the puzzle to come in a bit later on. Before we jump into the match against Essendon, Brad, I was keen to get your season predictions for Hawthorne. I know we're nice and early, but as all us nuffies like to do, we like to throw out a prediction far too early. What are your kind of predictions for Hawthorne in terms of finishing position, potentially playing finals?
I'm a bit more conservative. I thought the bookies at the moment have Hawthorne equal premiership favourites with Brisbane, which I think's crazy. I thought last year we over-exceeded our expectation. Not in a million years, as I said, that I think we would win a final. We're arguably the best form side in the competition after we started 1-6, I think it was. And from that point, we're a top 2 or 3 side for the majority of the season. I do think we had a really soft draw in the back half of the season. We got teams at the right time. We had a really good draw. This year, it's a lot harder, which is expected. We ended up winning a final. So, as I touched on earlier, our first 6 weeks is really, really hard. I think if we're 4-2 after 6 weeks, we've got Richmond and West Coast, I think round 7 and 8, which I'd expect us to win. So, if we can be 6-2 after 8 rounds, there's no reason why we can't push for a top 4 spot. I have us winning about 13 or 14 games and finishing somewhere between 6th and 8th. If we finish top 4, great, but it's such an even competition. I did my ladder predictions and I had us about 6th, and between 4th and probably 12th, there's probably going to be no more than 2.5 games difference because it's such an even competition. So winning games early is going to be really crucial this season, and as I said, our draw is really, really hard to start the year. So I've got us finishing 6th, which I think would be a great effort. A lot of people will say if Hawthorne don't finish top 4, it's a failed season. I don't agree with that. I think, as I said, last year we exceeded expectation. I still think our list has a few holes. I don't think we're going to win the premiership this year, and I probably think we're not going to win the premiership next year. I had us, hopefully winning the flag in about 2027. I still think Hawthorne are going to hit free agency hard. We bought in Josh Battle as a free agent. Tom Barras we had a trade for. But we're still, in my opinion, an elite midfielder short. I think Cam McKenzie can hopefully become that player. James Worpel is out of contract. He hits, free agency at the end of this season, and a lot of clubs are going to come hard for Worpel. Mitch Lewis is our number one key forward. He's injury prone. He's never played more than 15 games in a season. Kel Shadir is a young gun who's going to be a really good player. He's 19. He's got stress fractures in his back, so he's not going to play till the second half of this year. We need to be patient with him. So Oscar Allen's one that I've read a report. Hawthorne are interested in Oscar Allen, and I think would be a key player for us to target. We lack that elite key forward that I believe we need to, win our next premiership.
Yeah, he's like many of the great players out west. I think he's severely underrated by a lot of the footy community, but obviously you've kind of pricked your ears up at that report, and I did see that as well. And from what you've mentioned there in terms of needing a second key forward, and unfortunately with Mitch Lewis's kind of injury issues, Oscar Allen would certainly be a nice addition, and I wouldn't be shying away from Essendon putting their hand up for him as well. Although maybe there's someone else at West Coast that we've got our eye on, particularly after a couple of reports I saw today as well. Jumping into the game on Friday night, Brad, you mentioned around the last time we played you guys, which was round one last year, and a nice warm day at the G from memory. And maybe it was a case of us kind of playing you guys at the right time. But you did mention a really good record since 2021 for Essendon against Hawthorne. I know it's a bit difficult to answer because obviously we didn't play last week, and even if we did, playing up at Gold Coast is sometimes a tricky measuring stick, as we saw last year in terms of not many teams being able to get over the top of Gold Coast, yet when they travelled, they really struggled. So maybe not a good indication anyway of kind of where we're at form-wise. But overall, I'm keen to get your thoughts on Essendon's strengths and weaknesses, and maybe that's kind of more of a perception than the reality at the moment. We'll probably find out a little bit more on Friday night. But yeah, keen to hear what you kind of feel our strengths and weaknesses are, and that, as I said, can be as a list, how you kind of perceived us last year. Keen to get your thoughts.
Yes, I think you guys have had a pretty good pre-season. We know Brad Scott's coming to your club, and he noticed, I guess, the training levels weren't as they should be. The culture at the club needed a big change, and I think Brad's the right man for the job. I noticed, he's re-signed for an additional 2 more years, so he's going to be at the club for another 2 years, the end of 2027. And I think Essendon as a club needs stability, and I think Brad's the right man for that. I think he's a really good coach. I think he's won 11 games the last 2 seasons. I thought last year Essendon missing the finals was a big choke. You guys should have played finals last year. Your end of the season was an absolute disaster, and where you were, I think about round 17 or 18, there's no reason why you shouldn't have made finals. It was a really disappointing end to the season, especially with the start of the season that you had. I think you were top 4 for the, for the first half of last season. So I think this year, there's no reason why you can't challenge to play finals. I think Essendon's list at the moment, unfortunately, my opinion, I think you're sort of stuck in no man's land at the moment where you've got a list that can probably sneak into finals and maybe win a final, but that's the worst place to be. And that's why I love Sam Mitchell. When he came to Hawthorne, he said, it's going to be a slog. We might finish in the bottom 4 in my first couple of years, but Hawthorne Football Club play to finish top 4 and win premierships. We don't play to just make finals. And this might upset a few of your supporters, but I'm of the belief that if Essendon makes the finals and win a final, you guys will celebrate that like a grand final. And I think St Kilda are very similar. Fremantle's another club that's very similar, where you just accept mediocrity is not the word, but because you've been starved of success for such a long period of time, it creates a poor culture. And yes, Hawthorne had a great period of success, but Hawthorne's last flag was in 2015, and that's actually the last time where we won a premiership, where we won a final. So, we went out in straight sets in 16 and 18. And, since then we haven't won a final. And Sam came to the club and was honest and upfront right away. Where I think Essendon and those like St Kilda last year, the president spoke about it, where they come out and say, we believe we have the list that's good enough to win the grand final. And the truth of the matter is, the fact is, I look at Essendon's team on paper and it looks solid, but to me, it's not a team that's going to challenge for a premiership. So, that's my opinion on the Bombers list as a whole. Looking ahead to this season, like I said, I think you can make finals. I think there's no reason why Essendon can't win 12 or 13 games if everything goes to plan. But the depth that Essendon have is not as strong as, say, Hawthorne or the top clubs. If you get an injury to a Merritt or a Mackay, a Harry Mackay down back, or a Martin or someone like that, I don't think your VFL has strong enough depth to cover the loss of key players.
Yeah, I probably tend to agree with that. I think the starting team on paper, and look, we do have a pretty healthy list, touch wood, heading into the start of the year. So, I'm pretty optimistic about the team on paper this weekend. But as you said, a couple of key injuries, which, we've already seen across the preseason to a number of teams. Particularly, it seems to be those really important players, which is disappointing for the entire competition. Your Bontempellis, you mentioned Goulden before as well. If you do lose a couple of those top line players, which, there's been plenty of talk that we only have one of those in Zach Merritt, so that probably says a lot in itself. But absolutely agree with you. I think depth is needed, and that's obviously a worry for us, particularly our back line. A lot of the pre-season talk has been excitement around seeing Mackay, Reid and Ridley play together. We haven't seen that yet, as hard as that might be to believe. And it doesn't feel like long ago that Reid was limping off against Hawthorne round one last year. So
yeah, he did his hammy, didn't he?
Yeah,
I like Zach Reid.
I wasn't sure what it was, but it's always pretty severe, it seems, when it's one of our key backs. But he's had a rough run at it as well. So that might be at least a nice start for us. Hopefully they can stay on the park a lot longer than just the game on Friday night. In terms of strengths and weaknesses from my side, kind of looking at Hawthorne, Brad, I think we spoke about Hockball before. It's the ball movement, it's the quick transition, which is not only a great strength of Hawthorne's way of playing football, but it's certainly a worry for us in terms of a team that has struggled historically to defend quick transition, particularly on a ground such as the MCG, where you've got those wide wings and those expanses to really cut holes through a team that doesn't defend the ground well, like we haven't in the past. I hope that changes, but that's obviously a worry for us, and I think lines up really well in terms of this particular matchup. I think the negatives, I wrote down maybe a lack of a key tall. Now, obviously, we've seen Sicily go forward. Chol, whilst he played quite well, I thought on the weekend as well, he's probably not proven just yet as the main man. Obviously, Mitch Lewis out, and Gunston not getting a game was interesting alongside Bruce as well. So perhaps a key forward kind of short, and that obviously pairs up well with us having kind of our key back stocks looking healthy at the moment for now anyway. So that was kind of my analysis of the matchup without knowing the teams. Obviously, we're recording this on a Tuesday night. That could all go out the window on Thursday when the teams are announced. But that was kind of my analysis in that regard. Team changes that you expect for Hawthorne. Obviously, we haven't named a team for the season yet, but you've had your team named against Sydney last week. I know we've spoken about Warple being injured. It looks like that'll be sort of a month on the sidelines for him. How do you see the team lining up, and who do you see replacing?
Yeah, so there's a couple of options. Josh Ward's probably the one that will come in for Warple. Josh Ward was pick 7 in the draft. This is his 4th season at the level. He came in for Will Day in the finals last year and had an amazing game against the Bulldogs playing as a midfielder. The issue Josh Ward's had at Hawthorne since being drafted is he hasn't been able to cement a spot in the midfield because our midfield has been really consistent and really strong. We've got Will Day, John Newcomb. A lot of external supporters wouldn't rate Connor Nash, but he's an important player. He's a really good player. Warples are the other one. Sam Mitchell likes to run with those four as the key mids, and then Mackenzie, who plays a bit on the wing, will come inside. Dylan Moore will get a few centre bounce, time in the centre there as well. So Josh Ward's probably the one. Henry Huswaite's another one who got drafted a couple of years ago. He's a taller midfielder, inside midfielder. He's probably more like for Warple, but I think Josh Ward was our emergency last week. He obviously got the nod in the final. So I think they'll go with Josh as the replacement for Warple. The only other change might be if they decide to bring in another key forward, whether it's Jack Gunston or a McCabe. Sam Frost would probably be the one that would make way, and then we'd have to look at someone else as the sub. So who that is, I don't know, because Finn McGuinness, Harry Morrison are both important role players who I don't think are sub candidates. I think Frost will be the sub again. So I'd expect there to only be the one change, which will be Josh Ward for the injured James Warple.
Just on Frost as the sub, I certainly was surprised to see him named there, mainly just as a tall being listed as a sub. Now, obviously on the SCG, maybe that's a little bit more practical, but on the MCG, a big ground, I've spoken about it already, where, ideally you don't get an injury and you're able to have that luxury of subbing on a fresh player kind of at 3/4 time or maybe a little bit before or afterwards to give you some fresh run and maybe go through the midfield. I would be surprised if Sam Frost was named as the sub, but that's how you kind of see it, Brad. Do you expect that?
It's an interesting one because Sam doesn't like to make a lot of changes, especially after a win. And Sam Mitchell loves Sam Frost, but Sam Mitchell loves Chankwath Giath as well, CJ. And CJ was on the cusp of probably starting the season, but he got a hip knock at training last week, the week before last, and was ruled out of selection for the first round. But he's trained fully this week so far, and the injury report has said that he's available for selection. So for me on the MCG, I think CJ would be a perfect candidate to be our sub. I don't have him in our 22. Harry Morrison plays on a wing opposite to D'Ambrosio. Thank you, Essendon. Sorry, Essendon supporters, but whatever happened
You nearly got
there,
through without you mentioning that, Brad. I certainly wasn't.
that is, I was on this big time last year. I still cannot believe. And the reports that I read why Essendon got rid of him, didn't have a defensive part of his game, was soft. For his size, he's as courageous as anyone in our team. He goes back with the flight of the ball, runs hard both ways. I'm just bemused. I cannot believe that, especially after what you guys did with Basher Hooley when he ended up leaving you guys and going to Richmond, the exact same type of player. Massimo's now playing on a wing. He could have easily made the All-Australian team as a winger last year, and he'll take his game to another level this year. He's only 21 still, so that fascinates me. I still can't believe that we got him. I think it was for pick 63 or something, or pick 61, which is absolutely crazy. So yeah, that's yeah. I don't. With Sam, I agree with you. Like, I would not in a million years have Sam Frost as our sub. I'd start, as I said, Sicily is the centre half forward. I'd move Blake Hardwick back to play on Kako, and I'd bring in a runner to be the sub, which I think that suits CJ perfectly. So I wouldn't be surprised if CJ comes in as our sub, because he's the type of player that can come on for a quarter and have a big effect. Yeah,
absolutely. I think the weather conditions are going to be absolutely perfect on Friday night as well. I think it's 30-odd degrees.
Yeah.
And
at 85,000, expecting about, I wouldn't be surprised if I reckon there'll be at least 82, 83,000 as well.
Oh, absolutely. I think everyone's hungry for some footy back in Melbourne, and the old rivalry that we spoke about. I'm looking forward to the atmosphere on Friday night, that's for sure. In terms of looking at the Essendon team, Brad, I won't ask you to kind of name our team. I certainly
I can give you your team. Don't maybe you can tell me whether I'm close.
Go for it. If you've prepared that, Brad, I'll
you tell me what you think.
I'll let you know my thoughts.
Tell me your thoughts, and I'd love to get feedback from the Sash subscribers and our supporters from the backs. Andy McGrath. I think McGrath is a great matchup for the Wizard. I love the move of him to the back line over the last couple of years. I thought especially his first half of last season. I thought he was elite. He could have been in the All-Australian squad. A little quieter at the end of the year, but I think McGrath's become a quality player. He's a 250-game player. I know he cops a lot of flack. Many people say he's a terrible number one draft pick. I think he's been a fantastic player. He speaks really well. He seems like he's loved amongst the playing group, and I think he's a quality player. Ben Mackay, full back. I think he's going to play on Chol. I think it's going to be a hard matchup for Chol. I think Mackay, however you spell his name, is a quality defender. Cops a lot. Hawthorne were desperate for him, and they went all in on him last year. In hindsight, I'm happy we didn't get him because it allowed us to this year get Barras and Battle, which I think is a better combo than just Mackay as himself. I think he's a good player. I've got Jackson Pryor. I've seen he's going to be debuting. I think Pryor's had a really good preseason. We saw he was obviously drafted to the Eagles as a father-son, but for what I saw against Geelong, I think he's going to be a really good pickup. He was an SSP pickup. The Bombers have been elite at that. Sammy Durham, other than John Newcomb's, probably the best the best mid-season draft pickup. So I think Jackson Pryor will probably play on a Ginnivan. Half back line, I've got Redmond, Zach Reed at centre half back, who I'd love to see get a string of games. He was an elite, junior, was a top 10 draft pick. I think he can be a quality centre half back. Fingers crossed for you guys, his body can, hold up. I loved what I saw from him against Geelong. Still got to put on a bit of size, but I think he can be a quality AFL defender. Dylan Shield, I've got as your running half-back defender. I know he's moved there this pre-season. I like the move. He's got good pace. I think he does need to work on his disposal. He does still turn it over quite a bit. I noticed that as a midfielder as well. He likes to just get it on his boot and bang it. He doesn't raise his eyes or lower his eyes. But from what I saw in pre-season, I think that's going to be a really good move. If he'll probably average 25 plus possessions a game. So for those fantasy and Supercoach players out there, Dylan Shield is a lock. Get him into your side because he's going to be what we like to call the seagull for Essendon this season. And I think that'll be a positive for Ridley, who I've got on the bench. He could start in front of a Pryor. Pryor will probably start on the bench. Jordan Ridley will be on the field. But I think Ridley needs that running half-backman. I think a combination of Ridley with Mackay as the key and Redmond, and then with Reid as well, that's a quality backline. And then Andy McGrath is your lockdown. So that's what I've got as your back, and I've got Ridley or Pryor as your seventh on the bench. The midfield, I've got on one wing Xavier Dersma, who I think had a really underrated season for Essendon. Last year, he obviously came across from Port Adelaide, had a few soft tissue injuries in the back end of the season, but he runs really hard. He can push forward and kick a goal as well. The bow and arrow, I think he's a quality wingman in the AFL. Sammy Durham in the midfield, I spoke about him before, along with Jai. He was a mid-season pickup in the mid-season draft, similar to Jai Newcomb at Hawthorne, and he's an elite midfielder. He's hard, he tackles, gets the ball. I love him as a player, and I think he can take his game to another level. He's still young. Harrison Jones, I've got on the other wing. I might be wrong, but I noticed second half of last year, Harry Jones went on the wing. As I said, he pushes forward, he's tall, so he can go forward and take a mark. So I've got him on that wing. Half forward line, Nick Martin, who I touched on before. I think he's Essendon's most versatile player and probably your most overall skillful player. Zach Barrett's probably your best kick, but I think Nick Martin's an absolute star. I think he needs to stay in that role, and that matchup for Hawthorne's going to be a tough one. I think he's probably the one that we need to lock down on, other than Merritt, who we'll touch on. Nate Caddy as your centre-half forward. I think he's going to be an absolute superstar. Loved what he did against Geelong in the practice game. I think him and Kako could become an elite combination in the AFL for the next decade. Archie Perkins, who had arguably his best game of the season against us in round one. He's one that you guys really need to take the next step. He had some good games last year. Inconsistent still. He was another top 10 draft pick in the redraft as well. He's one that you probably need to play a bit more in the midfield. He's got a bit of X factor, can kick a goal, very skillful, but needs to be more consistent. So I think he sort of plays that Dylan Moore role quite well as that high half forward. Then full forward, we got Kako, who I can't wait to see him play. touch wood, he doesn't star against us, but I'm really going to watch him play this year. I think he's going to be the wizard of last season, this season, and he's already built for AFL football. He looks like an absolute superstar. I've got Sam Draper starting as full forward, which is an interesting one. I'm probably wrong because he'll probably start in the ruck against Meek, but Nick Bryan, that's obviously the other one. Essendon play 2 rucks, so those 2 will play. But I've got Draper at full forward. I think he's in for a massive year. Showed great signs last year. He's another one that can take his game to another level. He needs to be where Meek is at Hawthorne now, and there's no reason why he can't. He plays the same way. He just needs to get a bit more of the ball, but he can go forward, take a mark, and kick a goal. Kyle Langford, I've got in the other forward pocket. I think he might play a bit higher. I think his first half of last year was amazing. I think he slowed down. He struggled the back half of the year. He's another one that I think needs to lift and go to another level because he's an all-Australian type of player, Langford. So if they're all firing at the same time, when you look on paper, you got Martin, Kako, Caddy, Langford, Archie Perkins. That's a good forward line. Like, there's no reason that forward line, along with the midfielders, which we'll go through now, can't be kicking 14 plus goals, which 90 plus points will be enough to beat Hawthorne, in my opinion, on the MCG. The rucks, I've got Bryan, Nick Bryan as the starting ruck. As I said, it'll probably be Draper, but I just think it'd be interesting to see if you stretch. Hawthorne's got a tall back line, so you're going to need to start someone quite tall down there. Jai Caldwell, who I thought was brilliant last season, in and under, tough. I think other than Merritt was probably your best midfielder last year. And then I've got Zach Merritt, your captain, and he's the one who always chops Hawthorne up. Last year, I thought he was the difference, especially in the second half. I actually thought Hawthorne last year could have won the game. I thought we were the better team, probably for 2.5 quarters against the Bombers. But Finn McGuinness started as the sub last year and came on too late. And Merritt, I think, ended the game with 30 plus and had a big second half. So that's on ball. And then on the bench, I've got Ridley, Elijah Sardis, who I think's had a great preseason. He's a maligned player amongst Bombers supporters. He was obviously a high draft pick. I think pick 5 a couple of years ago. Spent the majority of last season in the VFL, but he looks to have put on size. I think his disposal at the moment is a bit suspect, but he's worked on that. It was definitely better from what I've seen in the preseason. I think he'd become a quality AFL player. Ben Hobbs and then Roberts I've got as the last one, who I thought got a few games at the end of last year as a half-back. Got a lot of the ball, showed pretty good signs. I think he's played more half-forward this preseason, but again, could be a good player. Gresham I've got as the sub. Roberts or Gresham I think will probably be the sub. I'd rather, for you guys, I think Roberts deserves to play. Gresham's the type of player that I think can come on. I think he kicked a couple of goals against us last year. He's been disappointing in my opinion. Like, stats-wise, maybe it looks good on paper because he has games, where he can bob up and kick 2 or 3, but he's often very quiet. So to me, I think he's a good sub option for you guys. If a Roberts is quiet, or if you need to sub off a Bryan and then Draper goes into the ruck to play the last quarter, I think Gresham's a good candidate for the sub. What do you think?
It's not bad, Brad. I just appreciate you putting in the time to do that because, as I said, I hadn't got that far yet. But a good analysis.
You're welcome to copy me, James. You're welcome to use it all if you want. Who did
I
I miss?
I might have to because I was trying to wait for you to leave someone obvious out there. But as I was jotting down the names that you've written down, I don't think there's anyone that you've missed. Notably, I know that some people, I guess, from the Essendon side were discussing whether Sardis and Hobbs could play in the same midfield, being relatively similar types of players, but obviously with that absence of Parrish, who's injured at the moment, I think there is probably room for both of them. The other, I guess, big body midfielder that we have is Will Setterfield, who played quite well in the time that he had on the ground against Geelong, but whether he's cracking into that side just now with a relatively healthy list, I'm not sure. Other than that, I think that could be hang on, Brad, but we'll have to wait until Thursday to see. Gresham, an interesting sub choice. I'm really looking forward to Gresham's season as well. I think he's the sort of player, though, that can have an impact coming on. Fresh legs in that forward half role, even going through the midfield. He's shown he can have an impact there. Perhaps when others are tiring, will only help him do that. Um, Beautiful. I think just to kind of wrap up, and I know that you kind of mentioned Nick Martin's name there as maybe someone who'll be the answer to this question, Brad. But is there a player that worries you most from the opposition? And look, I think this would be a pretty straightforward answer for most opposition reviews this year. It might be either Zach Merritt or Nick Martin. But if you had to pick one, and maybe it's outside of those two, maybe I've gone early, but is there someone that worries you from Essendon
No,
Friday night?
it's a flip of the coin between those two. Sam Mitchell doesn't tag. He did a couple of years ago when Hawthorne were a bottom four side when we finished 16th. Finn McGuinness was the best run with player in the league. Finn McGuinness plays in Hawthorne's best 22, but he plays more as a half forward, pushes up on to a wing. So I think he could be, if Nick Martin gets off the chain, Finn McGuinness could be a good matchup for Martin. I think Connor Nash, I'd love to see John Newcomb and Zach Merritt go head to head. I think Sammy Durham's a perfect matchup for Will Day. Will Day's Hawthorne's best player. Durham's probably got the height and the size. Zach Merritt's obviously a smaller midfielder, where I'd love to see John Newcomb and Zach Merritt go head to head. But Connor Nash, who I touched on before, is the run-with player Hawthorne use in the midfield, but he doesn't play a hard tag. He plays a body-to-body role. He's the player that always plays on Bontempelli when we play the Bulldogs. He plays on Patrick Cripps when we play against Carlton because he's got the size. He's a tall midfielder that's strong. The issue that we have with Merritt is he's smaller. So Newcomb and Merritt head-to-head would be great. But those are the two players, in my opinion, that I think is going to give us the most trouble. I can just see Martin, having 25 and kicking 2 or 3 goals. Zach Merritt's going to get, 30 possessions, but it's where he gets the possessions. I think in the competition, there's no better kick inside 50 than Zach Merritt. I think he hits the 20 to 30 metre kick from midfield to half forward or full forward better than anyone in the AFL. If Merritt's getting the ball, he works really hard. He gets a lot of possessions in the half back line, and a lot of people call them soft, but he works really hard to get those possessions. If Merritt's getting 15 to 20 possessions in the half back line, that's absolutely fine. Hawthorne are going to live with that. But if he's getting 15 plus possessions front of centre, that's going to be a big problem for Hawthorne because, like I touched on before, I think Essendon's got a quality forward line. I think, are you one key position forward short like Hawthorne? Probably. But you guys playing 2 forwards. And I think Nick Bryan's going to be a quality ruck. I was surprised Goldie played more than him last season. I think Bryan's going to be a good ruckman in the AFL. And Draper does have a bit of a forward craft. So I think you'll try and expose Hawthorne's defenders. I think Draper will spend quite a bit of time forward. And if Merritt's allowed the freedom in the midfield to hit up your forwards, and then obviously Kako and Perkins crumbing, I think that'll be a problem for Hawthorne. But I think it's going to be a great game. I've seen the bookies markets. I think the odds are wrong. I think Hawthorne at the moment, the line's about 21.5 points. It's going to be closer than that. Essendon can win this game easily. You'll be fresh. We're coming off a tough game. It rained in the second half against Sydney at the SCG. And like I've said before, Essendon play their grand final every year against Hawthorne. So this will be a close game. In my opinion, the team that wins this game is going to win this game by less than two goals. So if you're a betting man out there, gamble responsibly. But I'd be taking the Bombers at the 21.5 point line because I can't see if Hawthorne win this game, they won't win by more than 21 points. It'll be a close game. It'll be, as I said, either side will win this game by 10 to 15 points.
Beautiful, and I guess a nice segue into a bit of a prediction for the match. One hypothetical question I was keen to ask, Brad, if Essendon was to cause the upset on Friday night, and as you mentioned, that's maybe not as much of an upset as what some others are thinking, why do you think that will be? Where do you think Essendon could get on top of Hawthorne?
If Essendon win the midfield battle, we saw early against Sydney, the Hawthorne backline was exposed. I think the Swans had 5 inside 50s and kicked 5 goals straight. So they would get, Hawthorne dominated, but when the ball went in, the Hawthorne backline, in my opinion, the will be the best backline in the AFL with GWS. I think Sam Taylor's the best fullback in the AFL, and Jack Buckley as a number 2. I think those two are the best combo in the AFL, but I think Barrass and Battle can get to that level. It's just going to take them a bit of time. Jack Scrimshaw is an underrated player. He had an All-Australian caliber year last year alongside Sam Frost. Those two were a great combo. From round 12 onwards, I think other than Port Adelaide, Hawthorne had the number 1 rated defence in the AFL, and then they bring in Battle and Barrass. Then you've obviously got Sicily down there as well. Blake Hardwick's an elite lockdown defender. But if Essendon can win the midfield battle and get the ball inside 50 quickly, I think that'll be enough for you guys to kick a winning score with the quality you have forward of centre. I think I touched on before, I think 14 goals, I think a score of 90 points will probably be enough to win a team this game. I don't think 100 points is going to be needed, but if you kick 14 goals, you'll probably win this game.
Beautiful. And I guess to finish up, a score prediction from yourself, a best on ground, and who will kick the most goals?
Well, I've got to tip the Hawks, but it wouldn't surprise me if the Bombers won this game. I'm going to go Hawthorne 92, Essendon 88. Best on ground, I'm going to go with John Newcomb. I thought he was quiet last week. I thought Will Day was the best of our midfielders. I think Essendon will put a lot more work into Day. As I said, I think Sammy Durham can play not a defensive role, but I think Durham's got the game to hurt Day offensively as well. So I think Essendon's going to put a lot of time into Day, which means Newcomb's the one that'll be freed up, and I think he'll bounce back after last week. If the small forwards don't bounce back and can't kick probably 6 goals between the 4 of them, Hawthorne won't win this game. What Hawthorne did last week against Sydney was great. We kicked 14 goals with, 2 goals between Chol and the small forwards. If that happens again this week, Hawthorne aren't winning the game. They're not going to get 3 goals from Day. Meek's not going to kick 2 goals. So the small forwards need to perform for Hawthorne. I think Newcomb best on ground. Hawthorne will win by 4 points. Hawthorne don't really have a forward that's going to kick a bag of goals. They rely on a team performance where I'd rather see, 3 or 4 players kick multiple goals, and then you get, a couple of goals from your mids.
Beautiful, Brad. I really appreciate the time you've put into not only giving us some insight into Hawthorne, but the time you've put in analysing our team, which is obviously yet to play a game, so a difficult task to put to you this evening, but you've done a fantastic job, and I'll be keeping a keen eye on the team on Thursday and comparing it to the one that I've jotted down as you went through our team just before. Really appreciate your time this evening. As I said, Brad, I know our Sash community have plenty of family and friends who do follow the Hawks. Just before we finish, where can they find you online?
X, I'm very prominent at X. I love footy. I watch all 9 games every week. I like to see myself as, I guess, a partial supporter. I'm not overly biased towards the Hawks. I hope not. At Brad Klebanski on X, at Hawks Insiders for those that want to follow the Hawks Insiders community. I'm sure there's heaps of Bombers supporters out there, so we'd love to have you on board. But hit me up on X anytime. Would love to chat footy. I'll be following the Bombers closely this year. As I said, I was quite disappointed with how you guys finished last season, but I think, as I said, I think Brad Scott's the right man to take you forward. I'm glad they've re-signed him. Give him a couple more years to just build the team. I think your list is, good at the moment, but like I said, it's not good enough to challenge for a premiership, but there's no reason why in a couple of years you hit free agency, the Bombers are going to have a lot of cash in the salary cap. And Essendon's always been a club that players from, external clubs would like to come and play for. And I think Brad's building the culture up again. We saw Jake Stringer's gone now. So there's no reason why Essendon in, I reckon, 3 years' time, and you're going to hope, you guys better hope you guys are challenging, because once Tassie comes into the competition, if Essendon are that mediocre side again in 3 years' time, your supporters are going to be burning memberships, burning flags, because if you're a struggling AFL team in 3 years' time, you're in a world of pain. So Essendon really need to build over the next couple of years and hope that in 3 years, 4 years' time, they're a top 4 side.
Absolutely. I think the burning of memberships might have already happened over the last
So
few
stick
years.
to our Bombers fans. I think you can hopefully win a final this year and hopefully push for top 4 in the coming years.
Well, that sounds good to me, Brad. I might finish it there, and we'll only build that hope up a little bit further until at least Friday, when hopefully there's a competitive game, and that's certainly what you've predicted. So I'm looking forward to it. Definitely see you there at the G, I'm sure, on Friday night. But appreciate your time, Brad. Wish you all the best. Thanks, mate.
Thanks, James. Thanks.